In the heart of small-town America, where the cornfields stretched golden under endless blue skies and church steeples pierced the horizon like silent sentinels, lived a man named Elias Thorne. He wasn't born special, at least not in the way the world measured it. Elias grew up in a Rust Belt mill town in Ohio, the son of a steel worker who lost his job when the factories shuttered, and a mother who prayed the rosary every night until her knees bruised. Elias had been an ordinary kid, played football on Friday nights, worked summers at the gas station, dreamed of leaving for the big city. But God had other plans. It started with whispers, not audible voices at first, but a stirring in his chest during quiet moments, reading his Bible late at night, driving the back roads after midnight shifts at the warehouse. The words came clearer over time. You are chosen, not because you are worthy, but because I have work for you. Elias laughed it off at 25. Chosen? Him? He could barely keep his truck running, let alone lead some divine mission. But the signs multiplied. Dreams of fire falling from heaven onto corrupt cities, visions of people, ordinary folks like him, rising up with light in their eyes while darkness swirled around them. Then came the confirmations. A stranger at the diner handing him a crumpled note that read, "The time is now, stand." A sermon at First Baptist that seemed preached straight to his soul. And finally, the night the storm hit. Tornadoes tore through 3 counties that spring. Elias's neighborhood was spared, but the trailer park across the river wasn't. He drove through the debris at dawn, helping pull families from wreckage, handing out water, praying over the injured. That's when he met Sarah, a young widow with 2 kids, eyes hollow from grief. Her husband had died in a factory accident years earlier, the same plant Elias's father once worked. Sarah looked at him and said, "I prayed for help. God sent you." That was the beginning. Over the next few years, Elias gathered others, not famous preachers or rich donors, just regular Americans who felt the same pull. There was Marcus, a former Marine from Detroit who'd lost his way in addiction until a jail cell Bible study broke him open. There was Lena, a school teacher in Atlanta who'd watched her students fall into despair from broken homes and screens that fed them lies. There was Jamal, a mechanic in Houston who'd seen too many friends gunned down in the streets, yet still believed God could heal a nation. They called themselves nothing fancy, just the Remnant. But in their hearts, they knew they were the chosen ones of this generation. They traveled quietly at first, small prayer meetings in living rooms, community cleanups followed by open-air worship, testimonies shared around campfires. They spoke truth without apology. America had turned from God. The altars of entertainment, money, and self had replaced the altar of sacrifice. Families fractured, children raised by devices instead of parents, churches empty while stadiums overflowed with idols. Abortion mills ran unchecked, pride parades mocked holiness. Corruption in high places laughed at justice. And God was grieved. One night in a rundown warehouse outside Chicago, the group gathered for what they thought was just another meeting. Elias stood before them, worn Bible in hand. "I've been wrestling with this for months," he said, voice low. "The Lord showed me something last night. He said, 'Chosen ones, this is completely unacceptable. I will not tolerate this any longer.'" The room fell silent. No one moved. "He showed me the heart of America like a once beautiful garden now choked with weeds. The weeds are pride, greed, immorality, division. They've grown so tall they've blocked the sun. But he also showed me fire, not to destroy, but to purify. Judgment is coming, but mercy comes first. A final call, a last warning." Marcus leaned forward. "What does he want us to do?" Elias closed his eyes, remembering the vision. "He wants us to stand, not with swords or politics alone, but with truth spoken in love, with lives laid down, with prayer that shakes heaven. He said the chosen ones have been silent too long. We've compromised. We've tolerated what he hates. No more. They prayed until dawn. Tears fell. Repentance swept through like wind. Vows were made, not to man, but to God. Word spread slowly, then like wildfire. People drove hundreds of miles to hear them, not because Elias was eloquent, but because the Spirit moved. Miracles followed, healings in wheelchairs at rest stops, prodigals returning home mid-sermon, addicts delivered in parking lots. But opposition grew fiercer. Media called them extremists, pastors distanced themselves, threats came, anonymous calls, slashed tires, online mobs accusing them of hate. One evening in a field outside Nashville, under a sky bruised with storm clouds, Elias preached to thousands. Floodlights lit the crowd. He raised his voice. "Listen, America! God has been patient. He sent..." In the sprawling heartland of America, where the Mississippi River carved lazy paths through fields of swaying wheat and forgotten dreams, Elias Thorne was born into a world that had already begun to fray at the edges. It was 1985 in Milford, Ohio, a town built on the backbone of steel mills and Union pride, but by the time Elias took his first breath, the factories were wheezing their last. His father, Jeremiah Thorne, had been a welder, hands calloused from 40 years of forging iron into the sinews of bridges and skyscrapers. But globalization came like a thief in the night, shuttering the plants and leaving men like Jeremiah to rust alongside their machines. Elias's mother, Ruth, was the quiet force, a woman who mended clothes for neighbors by day and knelt by her bedside at night, whispering prayers that seemed to hold the family together like invisible threads. Elias grew up in the shadow of that loss. He was the youngest of three, with a brother who fled to the army and a sister who married too young to escape the suffocating small-town air. School was a blur of football games under floodlights where the crowd's cheers drowned out the whispers of despair, and weekends spent tinkering with old Chevys in the garage. But even as a boy, Elias felt a restlessness, a pull towards something greater. Church was obligatory. First Baptist on Sundays, where Pastor Reynolds preached fire and brimstone with a voice like gravel. Elias sat in the pews, staring at the stained glass windows depicting angels and judgment, wondering if God really saw places like Milford. By his 20s, Elias had settled into the rhythm of ordinary life. He worked third shift at a warehouse on the outskirts of town, loading trucks with pallets of goods bound for cities he'd never see. His days blurred into nights, punctuated by cheap beer at the local dive and fleeting romances that never stuck. But the whispers started then, subtle at first, like the hum of a distant radio. During those graveyard shifts, alone in the echoing aisles, he'd feel a warmth in his chest, words forming unbidden. "You are mine. I have chosen you." He'd shake it off, chalk it up to exhaustion or the echo of his mother's prayers. Chosen? For what? He wasn't a preacher, not a leader. He was just Elias, the guy who fixed your carburetor and forgot to tithe most Sundays. The signs escalated. One autumn evening, as leaves turned crimson like spilled blood, Elias dreamed vividly. A nation ablaze, not with destruction, but with purifying fire. Cities like New York and Los Angeles shimmered under judgment, skyscrapers of glass reflecting the faces of the lost, while humble homes in the heartland glowed with inner light. He awoke sweating, heart pounding, and drove to the riverbank at dawn. There, as mist rose from the water, he opened his Bible randomly. The page fell to Isaiah 6, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" The words leapt out, searing. That day, at the diner where he grabbed coffee, a grizzled trucker, eyes sharp as eagles, slid a note across the counter. "The time is now. Stand, chosen one." Elias crumpled it, but couldn't throw it away. Life pressed on, but the call deepened. Storms ravaged the Midwest that spring of 2015, tornadoes twisting like vengeful serpents across 3 states. Milford was grazed, but the trailer park across the river was obliterated, homes scattered like matchsticks. Elias volunteered without thinking, joining the rescue crews at first light. Amid the splintered wood and tangled wires, he pulled a young boy from the rubble. the child's mother, Sarah, clinging to him with gratitude that bordered on awe. Sarah was 28, a widow whose husband had perished in a mill accident 5 years prior, the same plant that had claimed Jeremiah's job and spirit. She had 2 kids, little Emma with curls like sunshine, and Tommy, all scraped knees and defiant eyes. "I prayed all night," Sarah whispered as Elias handed her a blanket. "God sent you. You're one of his chosen." Those words ignited something. Elias began seeking, reading voraciously, old revivalists like Finney and Edwards, modern voices warning of cultural decay. He saw America not as the shining city on a hill, but as a garden overgrown with thorns, families shattered by divorce and addiction, children indoctrinated by glowing screens peddling emptiness, abortion clinics dotted the landscape like grim altars. Political corruption festered in Washington, where leaders sold souls for power. Pride and perversion paraded openly, mocking the Creator's design. And God? He was grieved, his patience wearing thin. Elias started small, prayer walks around town at midnight, interceding for the lost. Then gatherings in his living room, first just Sarah and a few friends sharing testimonies over coffee. Word spread. Marcus joined next, a towering black man from Detroit, ex-Marine scarred by Iraq and heroin. He'd hit rock bottom in a county jail, where a smuggled Bible became his lifeline. "God chose me in the pit," he'd whisper, voice rumbling like thunder. "Now I fight his battles." Lena came from Atlanta, a fiery schoolteacher weary of curricula that twisted history and biology into lies. Her students, inner-city kids with potential dimmed by broken homes, needed truth, not indoctrination. "The enemy's in the classrooms," she'd declare, eyes flashing. Jamal from Houston's